The final segment of the show for today. The topic is the population explosion in Africa, and Dr. LMadu has given us some almost impossible statistics in reference to this increased population and the impact that it will have not only upon the continent of Africa, but indeed upon the entire world population. Dr. Madu, go on and give us some more of those frightening, in a real sense, statistics in reference to this, because what you're talking about is something that is less than 50 or 60 years from now. Is that what we're saying? And now let's go on. I'm sorry, go on.
And like I said, what kind of measures should African governments put in place to control the population methodically? Because it could be a good thing if the population is controlled. So like I said, they might adopt the one-child, two-child policy. That might work. If they can break the cultural and psychological barrier to that, there got to be a lot of education to be before that could happen. Yeah, they could also, educate people on the use of contraceptives, because Africans are not very, both male and females, are not very receptive about contraceptives. Yeah, so that Uganda has been trying a lot, to get people to accept that. Most women, they could also, condoms. A lot of the men over there refuse. From some of the conferences I've had in, about AIDS, I've had those kind of complaints. Most of the men do not want to use condoms, at least as a preventive measure of getting pregnant. That's very critical. And on the other hand, good governance really will be most important, in the scheme of things. When governments, put their hands in the till all the time, siphoning funds that could be used for infrastructural development, that does not help provide the basic infrastructure for the cities to grow. For example, the city of Lagos in Nigeria, which is almost 15 million people, is still using the infrastructure that was built almost 20, 30 years ago for a population half the current size. Okay? So it's difficult to provide for that kind of population when you're using an infrastructure that is
30 years old.
30 years old. Okay. Electricity. In most African countries, electricity is probably, they see electricity once a month, sometimes once in 6 months. Why? Because they are using old grids that were 50, 60, 70 years old to supply a population that has, grown almost tenfold. See, like a country like Nigeria, hardly have light. You are using electric grids that were built for probably 60 million people years ago in the 70s to feed a population of 160 million in 2012.
Almost 3 times as many people in the population as it was when it was built.
Yes. So those changes have to be made, and it requires, a proper governance where there will be accountability, so that every dollar brought into the country is used for developmental purposes. And that's very critical if these governments in Africa can arrest the situation. A good example is Rwanda. You know how many people, were slaughtered in Rwanda and all this, but it didn't prevent the population from, exploding. What Kagame is doing now, he started reforesting the country, making sure trees are planted again back to those places where it has been cut. A lot of times, Africans, they cut the fire, the wood to use for fire and all this. So Kagame is trying to reforest the country again, because those things create a lot of erosions, Secondly, he has said, okay, men will have to go through a vasectomy, and they will be paid. They will be given stipends to undergo that process. So if you have 2 or 3 kids, also they say, okay, we got to have vasectomy, that's enough. And that has helped, keep down the population in Rwanda. Like I said before, it's a small country, with the highest density, So that is very, very important. They got to have policies. And there are some African presidents who say, well, our population is our resource. Like President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. Say, oh, no, we don't worry about that. But then you think of a country like Uganda that's a small country, having 94 million people in 2050, sitting in that, you know, small space, there has to be trouble, definitely. There will be trouble. So that population has to be managed. Yeah, you know, during wars, yeah, huge population is a resource, like we know. You know, we hear that all the time. That is correct. But then it has to be managed properly in order to become a resource. Yeah, the Chinese population now is a resource. You know, bigger market, bigger, you know, employment, this capacity, bigger production because of the number of people, because the government has managed, you know, to channel that population. Exactly, channel the growth properly. So India the same. India is booming now because they are managing the population and high employment, high, you know. So that can be managed to become productive. It's not something bad, but the governments have to control it. You know, uncontrolled growth, population growth, is a panacea for disaster. Even in this city we live, you can see how the city has been expanded.